Most people think global power belongs to the giants, countries like China, the US, or Russia. But what if I told you the real power of the modern world lies in a country smaller than some Chinese cities? A tiny island that quietly runs the global economy without owning a single oil field, gold mine, or massive army. You see, while superpowers were fighting over land and influence, this small nation focused on something invisible, something that fits on your fingertip: microchips. And today, every smartphone, airplane, electric car, and even military weapon depends on them. So much so that if this one island stops producing chips for even a few weeks, the entire world could collapse. Yet, there's one problem: China wants it. And if Beijing ever succeeds, it won't just be a territorial victory, it could mean one country controlling the brains of global technology. In this video, we'll uncover how Taiwan became the world's most valuable island, why China can't afford to let it go, and what this silent battle means for the future of every nation on Earth. By the way, if you like this type of content, then I guess you should hit the subscribe button, right? Alright, moving on. For decades, the world has looked at China as the unstoppable force, the factory of the planet, the manufacturing superpower that turned cheap labor into global influence. From iPhones to high-speed trains, made in China became not just a label, but a statement of dominance. And next to it, floating quietly in the Pacific, lies Taiwan, an island barely the size of Switzerland. At first glance, it's just another small Asian nation, polite, democratic, and easy to overlook. If you zoom out on a world map, it almost disappears into the blue. Most people believed Taiwan depended on China. After all, China's massive market was right next door, and Taiwan's exports were heavily tied to it. To many outsiders, the relationship looked one-sided, the giant feeding the small neighbor. But beneath that calm surface, Taiwan was building something revolutionary. Not in its military, not in its politics, but in its machines. While China was racing to build skyscrapers, Taiwan was building circuits. While the world was obsessed with oil and steel, Taiwan mastered silicon. It started decades ago, a quiet bet on a technology that barely anyone understood at the time: semiconductors. Tiny chips that could store and process information faster than anything before. And while other countries treated it as just another tech trend, Taiwan treated it as national survival. They didn't have the luxury of vast resources or military strength, so they turned brains into their defense system. Engineers became their soldiers, and clean rooms, those sterile white spaces where chips are born, became their battlefields. This strategy led to the creation of TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. And in just a few decades, TSMC didn't just join the chip industry, it became the chip industry. Today, TSMC manufactures over 60% of the world's semiconductors and an astonishing 90% of the world's most advanced chips. Think about that for a second. Every iPhone you touch, every Tesla that drives, every AI system that thinks, all of them rely on chips made in Taiwan. The irony, even China, the very power that claims Taiwan as its own, depends on these chips to fuel its factories, smartphones, and fighter jets. So, while the world believed Taiwan needed China, the truth is China needs Taiwan far more. This tiny island quietly turned itself into the heartbeat of modern civilization, the silent engine behind every innovation. But there's a twist. Because when the entire world depends on something so small, that small thing becomes the biggest target. And that's exactly what's happening now. When the world was chasing power through land, oil, and armies, Taiwan quietly chose a different path: intelligence. Instead of building missiles, it built microchips, and in doing so, it built leverage. Because in today's world, power isn't just about who has the most weapons. It's about who controls the technology that makes those weapons work. That's exactly what Taiwan realized decades ago. Its leaders understood something that even the global superpowers didn't fully grasp back then, that whoever controls semiconductors controls the modern world. And so, while other nations were pouring billions into militaries and mega projects, Taiwan invested in brains. It turned its universities into training grounds for engineers, its factories into temples of precision, and its innovation into a weapon no one could steal easily. By the 1990s, TSMC wasn't just a chip company, it was becoming a global necessity. And that's when the real power shift began. Suddenly, giants like Apple, Nvidia, Intel, and even the US military couldn't function without Taiwanese chips. Imagine that, one small island holding the keys to every advanced machine humanity relies on. But power never comes without attention, and in Beijing, that attention turned into obsession. To China, Taiwan isn't just a breakaway province, it's a technological crown jewel sitting right off its coast. One that could instantly make China the uncontested global superpower if it came under its control. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. China still depends on Taiwan for its own chip supply. Despite years of investment, it hasn't yet mastered the most advanced semiconductor manufacturing. And that dependency stings. It's like needing oxygen from someone you claim doesn't exist. So, while the official narrative talks about reunification, the real motivation runs deeper: strategic control. If China ever took Taiwan, it wouldn't just gain territory, it would gain control over the most critical resource of the 21st century: technology itself. The US and its allies understand this too, which is why they have drawn a red line around the island. Billions of dollars in arms deals, intelligence sharing, and naval patrols now revolve around one purpose: to make sure Taiwan never falls. In response, China has surrounded the region with military drills, gray zone warfare, and cyber attacks. A pressure campaign meant to make Taiwan feel isolated and cornered. And caught in between are 23 million people living every day under the shadow of a possible invasion. People who have learned to turn fear into innovation and pressure into progress. Because Taiwan knows one thing: if it ever stops being useful to the world, it stops being protected. So it keeps pushing forward, making chips smaller, faster, and smarter, ensuring that no matter what happens, the world cannot afford to let Taiwan fall. At first glance, it doesn't make sense. How could a tiny island of 23 million people, without a massive military, without vast land or resources, hold the world hostage? But that's the irony of our age. Power isn't measured in tanks or oil barrels anymore. It's measured in nanometers. Every major economy, the US, China, Europe, and even Japan, depends on microchips to function. They run our cars, our hospitals, our satellites, our stock markets, even our missiles. And almost all of them trace back to one source: Taiwan. So now, the balance of power has flipped. For the first time in history, the entire global economy depends on a single company, TSMC, located in one of the most politically sensitive regions on Earth. It's called the Silicon Shield. The idea is simple. As long as Taiwan produces chips the world needs, no one dares to destroy it. Because doing so would trigger an economic catastrophe bigger than any war. That's Taiwan's genius. It turned dependence into defense. Instead of nuclear weapons, it built something far more powerful: indispensability. But that shield is fragile, because while the world relies on Taiwan, it also fears what might happen if China makes a move. And that fear ripples across global systems. From Wall Street to Silicon Valley, from Seoul to Singapore, every time tensions rise in the Taiwan Strait, chip prices surge, stock markets wobble, and tech companies panic. Imagine if those factories in Hsinchu, the beating heart of global innovation, suddenly went dark. No more iPhones, no more cars, no more AI. The modern world would literally stop. Even China knows this. That's the paradox. It threatens the island it depends on. China's smartphones, electric vehicles, and even military hardware rely on chips made in Taiwan. So while Beijing calls Taiwan a rebellious province, it's also Taiwan's best customer. And on the other side stands the United States. The US sees Taiwan as the last stronghold in the Pacific, both militarily and technologically. If Taiwan falls, America's entire tech ecosystem could crumble overnight. That's why Washington is pouring billions into its own Chip Act, trying desperately to reduce dependence on this single island. But here's the twist. Even if the US builds factories, it can't replicate what Taiwan has: decades of experience, precision engineering, and trust. You can copy machines, but you can't copy mastery. So now, both superpowers, China and the US, find themselves trapped in a Taiwanese paradox. They can't dominate it, but they can't live without it either. And that's what makes Taiwan not just valuable, but untouchable. It's not power through force, it's power through necessity. A new kind of dominance, born not from empire or conquest, but from intelligence, resilience, and timing. Yet, every shield has cracks. Because the more the world depends on Taiwan, the more fragile global stability becomes. One earthquake, one blockade, or one political misstep, and the entire system could collapse like a row of falling dominoes. And as tensions rise in the Taiwan Strait, one question keeps everyone awake at night. What happens if the silicon shield breaks? The future of the world may come down to a single island, one that most people couldn't even point to on a map 20 years ago. But today, every major decision made in Washington, Beijing, or Silicon Valley has one silent variable in the equation: Taiwan. Because if Taiwan stands, the world runs. If Taiwan falls, the world stops. That's how fragile the 21st century order has become. Every smartphone in your hand, every car on the road, every missile in the sky, all depend on chips designed, built, and perfected in one of the most politically explosive regions on Earth. And that's not just a technological risk, it's an existential one. China believes Taiwan's reunification is inevitable, a matter of national destiny. It sees the island as unfinished business, a piece of history that must return home. But behind that nationalistic story lies something far more strategic: control of the world's most advanced technology. Because if Beijing ever takes Taiwan, it wouldn't just reclaim territory, it would seize the brains of global innovation. The world's servers, satellites, and defense systems would instantly come under China's potential influence. It would be the single greatest shift in economic and military power since World War II. And that's why the US can't let it happen. For America, Taiwan isn't just a friend, it's a firewall. Defending Taiwan is defending the digital backbone of the West. Without it, the United States could lose its technological edge, and with it, its global leadership. So now, the Pacific Ocean is no longer just water, it's a chessboard. Every naval exercise, every alliance, every trade deal is part of a silent race. A race for who controls the next era of technology. But here's the problem. The more both sides prepare to protect Taiwan, the closer they inch toward the very war everyone is afraid of. And Taiwan, it sits right in the middle, calm on the surface but surrounded by storm clouds. Its people live with the tension of being both protected and threatened at the same time. Yet, despite the danger, Taiwan keeps moving forward, building, innovating, and proving that small nations can shape the destiny of giants. It's not just surviving, it's redefining what survival means in a world run by technology. Because the story of Taiwan isn't just about chips or geopolitics. It's about how intelligence can outsmart size, how strategy can outlive strength, and how one small island can become the center of the modern world. But the clock is ticking. Tensions are rising, and the world is holding its breath, waiting to see who makes the first move. Because the question is no longer if the battle for Taiwan will happen, the real question is when it does, who will control the future?